Hi, this video is part one in a series of videos that are going to review the Residential Building Inspector ICC certification. It's test B1. It's going to use the 2021 International Residential Code, and this correlates to an online series of tests that have been created that mimic the ICC test you're actually going to see. The answers in this online test, they're very close in terms of what the actual test looks like. This has been taken from discussions with people that have taken this test, as well as myself when I took the test, and extracted from the highlights that I included in my personal 2021 IRC. So let me show you the test and go through each of the questions and how this works. So the quizzes are placed on a subdirectory at catchsunlight.com, specifically catchsunlight.com /QFPE. If you do end up looking at this in the future, I'm going to migrate these training sessions over to a subdirectory at livesayconsulting.com. I just haven't gotten to that yet. But I just put up a quiz today for RBI B1, that's Residential Building Inspector B1. This also covers Residential Plans Examiner. So the questions in here are going to cover both exams if you need to take them. I'll probably end up with 4 of these. It does take me a little while to create, so it'll be a slow process. I don't expect it to be complete with our B1 test for about 2 months. But this will get you going. This covers the first 3 chapters of the 2021 IRC. So if you pop that open, you can see that it has big text. I made a few changes. If you're familiar with some of the other exams I've done, I made a couple minor changes on this. So let me show you really quick how this works. There's 152 questions on this first exam for the B1 ICC test. So in this case, let's just look at 152. The clear height above and below a mezzanine floor shall not be less than what? 7 feet. If you hit the submit button at the bottom, it highlights the correct answers with blue, highlights the incorrect answers with red. I changed, originally it was highlighting with green, but some people with color blindness couldn't tell the difference. It became challenging. So let's look at 151. I want to show you something else. When are walls permitted below the flood level plain in a coastal high hazard area? That's when the walls and partitions are not part of the structural support. It's the only place it's allowed. You can resubmit. It keeps a constant queue in terms of what you've submitted and what the correct number is. In this case, correct number is 2 out of 152. We've only answered 2 of them. They're highlighted in blue, and you can continue accordingly. So let me start up at the top. I think the best way to do this, I want to go through each of these questions. You could go on your own, but what some of the feedback I've had on some of the other videos I've done is it's actually handy to do this, to go through, and if somebody simply wants to listen along without having to watch, let's say they're doing an inspection at a site and they treat this as though it's a podcast, you can actually just listen to these specifications, these questions and answers and references, and you do that repeatedly. It's going to improve your skills and help you be able to take that test in the long term. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Let me show you this. We'll go question by question. Let's start with question number 1. Which appendices in the IRC are required? Now keep in mind, this is the 2021 Residential Building Code by ICC. This is for the B1 test. So it gives you the reference R102.5. That's the 2021 IRC. I want to be clear about that because if you look at the 2024, the numbers aren't going to line up. And it gives you 4 answers. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at R102.5 and see what it says. R102.5, if you jump down here, R102.5 says provisions in the appendices shall not apply and specifically referenced in the adopting ordinances. Now, I did skip a couple other ones in the beginning. You can go back and take a look at them. The purpose. These are generic questions. I don't know why I ignored them, but I did. But in any event, let's just quickly touch on these before I jump in from section 101 and the start of 102. So let me just read these, and then we'll go on and answer that reference 102.5 question. Provisions of this code shall apply to townhouses and buildings not more than 3 stories in height. Important to know that. Purpose of this code is to establish minimum requirements And then here, where there is a conflict between a general requirement and a specific requirement, the specific requirement shall be applicable. And I'll show you situations where that happens. So let's go back to 102.5. What this means is, unless it's specifically adopted by the municipality through ordinance, it doesn't apply. So if you go back to the body of the text or these questions, the answer is here, those appendices specifically adopted by municipality ordinance. That's the correct answer. You can check that really quick. If you go down here and hit submit, it'll say that there's 3 out of 152 that are correct now. And you'll see that this is enclosed by a rectangle that shows that it's correct. Let's jump to the next one, item number 2. What times are appropriate for an inspector to have access to a property? It gives you the reference, R104.6. Let's take a look at that reference. 104.6 simply says, where it is necessary to make an inspection to enforce this code, it's at all reasonable times. It's hard to define what that means. I think there's some subjectivity. But as far as the answer in this particular example, it's at reasonable times to inspect. That's what was put. So once again, you go down, check it. It comes out, 4 out of 152. So you can go through this process. I'm not going to continue checking it, but I'm simply showing you what you can do if you wanted to improve this, or if you're confused on a question, you can check it. Question number 3, when is it acceptable for used material to be applied in new construction? Reference is R104.9.1. Let's take a look at that. 104.9.1. Used materials and equipment. Used materials and equipment and devices shall not be reused unless approved by the building official. It's right there. So if you look at the list of available options, it says for this question, when approved by the building official. It's quoted right out of the actual referenced code. Let's go to question number 4. Modifications are allowed as approved by the building code official where there are practical difficulties in carrying out the provisions of the code for all of the following except. Let's go ahead and look at the reference, 104.10. 104.10, where there are practical difficulties involved in carrying out the provisions of this code. Let's see, there are some options here. You're allowed to do all of the following except. It says that special individual reason makes a strict letter of the code impractical. So that is one of the options. You have does not list on health, life, or safety. That's another of the options under question number 4. Shall be recorded and entered into the files of the Department of Building Safety. That's option, the final option, option D here, with the list of 4. So the only option available is the first one, when the requirement is not cost effective for the type of construction. That's the wrong answer. So what you do is, in this case, just select that first answer. I'm using A, B, C, and D. They don't show on this, but that's, it's the same thing. I didn't include that there. So once again, it would be the first one. Cost cannot impact applying the code. These other 3 options are allowable, but the first one's not. Let's take a look at 5. Where there is insufficient evidence of compliance with code requirements for materials, tests can be required by the code official and shall be paid by who? Reference is 104.11.1. So let's use an example. Let's say there's a material, something I just dealt with as an AHJ was paint. Paint was required in this particular facility to be Class A. There was a couple options. In fact, I was using block filler was the question. The question was, block filler was applied. Did it meet the Class A requirements? There was no data on it. What it says is code official, insufficient evidence of compliance with code requirements. The code official, can require additional tests. And this time what I did is I just had other similar products brought to my attention that showed that, this is not a problem, same constituents, not an issue. So, but if I had to, if I required it to be tested, the expectation would be, who's going to pay for it? Technically, it's not the jurisdiction, answer number 1 here. But let's go read the code, 104.11.1. So 104.11.1, required tests as evidence of compliance to be made at no expense to the jurisdiction. So you can't have the jurisdiction pay for that. That means not the building code department, not the state designated funds, not the jurisdiction. The only option in this question is building owner agent. So in this case, you'd simply choose building owner agent. So there's the first 5 questions answered. Let's go down to the next one, 6, where there is insufficient evidence of compliance with code requirements for materials, testing procedures shall be approved by R104.11.1. The building official shall approve testing procedures, right there. So what you do is, building official, that's who you'd pick. Who is ultimately responsible for obtaining a required building permit? R105.1. So let's go look at R105.1. R105.1, any owner or owner's agent who intends to construct shall obtain the required permit. Make an application to the building official and obtain the required permit. So the answer is owner or owner's agent. So let's look at item number 8. Who shall a building application for required permit be applied through? Once again, R105.1, we just answered that previously. It's the building official. Not going to go back and do that again. Which of the following requires a building permit? R105.2. Guaranteed you're going to have a question on this. Absolutely. So you have fences that are 7 feet 6 inches high, sidewalks, driveways, 20-inch deep prefabricated swimming pool. Which one needs a permit? Let me show you that section. So 105.2 over here in all these subsections, take a look at that. Fences not over 7 feet. So if you're under 7 feet or under, you don't need a permit. You don't need a permit for sideways and driveways. And you don't need a permit for a 20-inch pool. I don't have it highlighted here, but just look through it. You'll see it. Yeah, there it is. No, that's swings and playground. In any event, take a look at it. I don't see it popping up as I look, but the point is, the answer is clear. It's right here. And ICC will do this. They'll try to throw some wrenches into the mix. But fences not over 7 feet. What you have in the actual question is a 7-foot fence. So let's go ahead and address that. So we'll choose the fences that are 7 feet 6 inches high. Okay, which of the following does not require a building permit? 105.2.2, constructing a 100 square foot structure attached to an existing residence, the creation of a 280 square foot separate shed, the installation of a new power supply within a residential shed, ordinary repairs to existing structures. So if you take a look, we'll look at 105.2.2 and see what that says. 105.2.2. So if you go down here, application or notice to the building official is not required for ordinary repairs to structures. So it says it right there. That's your answer. So let's go back and check out problem 11. Which of the following is required on a building permit application? R105.3. So let's go ahead and take a look at that reference, R105.3. 105.3 says, application for permit. To obtain a permit, the applicant shall, let's see here, which of the following is required on a building permit? So you need to have street address, find the location, so description to locate proposed building or work is required. So the other stuff, it's irrelevant. It's just the first item in that list. It's item number A. In this case, just select description to locate proposed building or work. 12, an application for permit shall be deemed to have been abandoned how many days after the date of filing if no effort is made to pursue the permit? So let's go ahead and take a look at that R105.3.2. This comes up all the time because it's the same number for abandonment or continued working. You can extend it, that kind of thing. But let me show you the reference. 105.3.2, time limitation of application. An application for a permit for any proposed work shall be deemed to have been abandoned 180 days after the date. And also down here, not sure, just keep that in mind. 180 days comes up a lot. It's here as well for extensions for work, but 180 days comes up a lot. So just keep that in mind. So go ahead and select 180 days. Construction documents not for an alteration or repairs are required to have which of the following? R106.2. So if you're doing, let's just take a look at like new construction, 106.2. 106.2, if we come down here to 106.2, site plan or plot plan, construction documents for not for an alteration or repair. So the construction document submitted with the application for permit shall be accompanied by a site plan, and the building official, let's see, authorized to waive the requirement for a site plan where the application for permit is an alteration or repair. So if you're doing some construction and you're submitting some documents and it's not an alteration or repair, you have to have a site plan. So so let's check out item 14, question 14. Where the building official issues a permit, the construction documents shall be approved in writing or by a stamp that states, let's look at 106.3.1. 106.3.1, sets shall be returned to the applicant, let's see, there it is, reviewed for code compliance, right there. Reviewed for code compliance. The next question says, 2 plans are required to be approved or stamped by the building department. One shall be retained by the building department and the other shall be, and if you look here, shall be kept at the site of the work. So the second question here, 15, kept at the site of work and open to inspection by the building official. That's why you have to have 2 stamp plans, one for the building department, one at the site. Okay, question 16. All changes made during construction that are not in compliance with the approved construction documents. Let's look at 106.4. 106.4 says, work shall be installed in accordance with the approved construction documents. Any changes made during construction that are not in compliance with the approved construction documents shall be resubmitted for approval. So it'd be the first item, item A there. So go ahead and select the first one. Continuing on down, how long shall one set of approved construction documents be retained by the building official from the date of completion of the permitted work? It's R106.5. Let's look at that reference. R106.5, retention of construction documents. One set approved, blah, 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 retained by the building official for a period of not less than 180 days. Once again, the 180 days comes up a lot. In fact, there's only one situation where it's not 180 days regarding this kind of stuff. So just remember 180 when in doubt. Okay, 18. Question 18, inspection. Let's go ahead and look at question 18. Inspection of the foundation shall be made after, and section R109.1.1. And I want to keep in mind this is residential construction. It's not necessarily commercial. Commercial is going to have some different requirements for inspections. So residential stuff's a little bit easier. But let's look at 109.1.1. 109.1.1, inspection of the foundation shall be made after poles or piers are set. So if you look at 18, it says after the poles or piers are set. That's the answer. 19, when is fire resistance rated construction between dwelling units? So let's say you have a townhouse or something, or between multiple dwelling units, you have to have them separated. Between dwelling units required to be inspected. So when do you have to inspect fire-rated construction? So let's look at 109.1.5.1. So 101.9.5.1, if you look over here on this section, what it says is fire-rated construction is required between dwelling units, and it shall require an inspection of construction after your gypsum board is up, but before any plaster is applied. So always keep that in mind. That's across the board. Even if you're in the IBC, you have to have your inspection before your plaster, your taping's done. 20, who is responsible for notifying the building official that an inspection is ready and shall make sure access is available for such inspections? Let's look at 109.3. 109.3 says inspection requests. It shall be the duty of the permit holder or their agent to notify the building official, and it shall be the duty of the person requesting, if that's the owner or owner agent, to make sure that they provide access and a means to inspect such work. So the answer in this case, the answer would be owner or owner's agent. So if you look, permit holder or their agent is what it is. And technically the owner or owner agent has to get the permit, so it's a permit holder. Okay, number 21, a portion of a structure that is changed of occupancy shall not be occupied. So if you're going from like this is more for an international building code, but let's say you have a residence, you're changing it to an institutional occupancy, like an I-4 for daycare or something like that. Well, you can't occupy that anytime you're changing an occupancy. So let's look at R110.1 and explain that. R110.1 says as follows. A building or structure shall not be used or occupied in whole or in part, and a change of occupancy of a building or structure or portion thereof shall not be made until the building official has issued a certificate of occupancy. So if you look on question 21, the answer is the third one down. The building official has issued a certificate of occupancy. A lot of people don't understand this. It's not just about construction, it's also about use. Occupancy type. There's different occupancies. There's assembly occupancy or business occupancy or institutional or residential or storage, etc. Factory, industrial, you name it. Anytime you change the definition of what you're doing with that structure, you have to have it approved by the building official. Let's look at 22. The building official is authorized to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy before the completion of work provided that, let's look at R110.4. R110.4 says as follows. The building official is authorized to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy before completion of the entire work, provided such portion or portions shall be occupied safely. Safely is another trigger word. They're always going to default to safely. So if you look here, portions occupied shall be done safely. Second item or item B. 23, question 23, interpretation of the code to validate determinations made by the public or by the building official is performed by, let's just look at R112.1. So Board of Appeals. Appeals of orders, determinations made by the building official, they're going to be dealt with by the Board of Appeals. What that means is you have a problem with the building official and he's or she's way off base. And look, I've dealt with this before. You have the option to say that you're wrong. Now, they're going to shut down your work. They're going to delay things for you. It's annoying as heck. But you always have the options to go to a Board of Appeals. And I don't think they're used enough because a lot of times building officials are not right. So, but most of the time the municipality is going to side with them, which is really annoying. That's one of the things I do. I'll come in and I'll help people navigate through the codes as a master code professional and as a licensed engineer. So that's actually something I do help with occasionally when, as part of my occupation, consulting side business. All right, 24. Work performed contrary to the provisions of the code can warrant. Let's go to R. Shucks, what did I mean there? That should have been R14. But it says R14.1. Let's go to R14.1. Where the building official finds any work regulated by this code being performed in a manner contrary to the provisions of this code, the building official is authorized to stop work. So item C down here, the third answer is a stop work order issued by the building official. And occasionally, look, all these questions I went sequentially to make it easy. So if I made a mistake in the reference, just apply common sense. It's in the direction of where it needs to be. It takes a long time to write this, and I don't have the time to go back and correct everything. 25, a stop work order shall include all of the following except. Let's go to R114.2, find out what a stop work order requires. Issue and stop work order shall be in writing. So let's go through each one of these in the question. Shall be in writing. Shall be given to the owner or owner's agent. Shall state the reason for the order. But it doesn't talk about date by which work can resume. So in this case, the answer is date by which work can resume. Let's jump over to Chapter 2. When in doubt, always go to Chapter 2. You're going to have a lot of answers there that'll help you out. So an open space bounded on 3 or more sides by walls or a building is, I'll just show that to you. If you jump over here in definitions, if you go to court, court would be here. This is going to be on the test. That's the definition. So technically that meets the definition of a court. 27. What is a material installed to restrict the movement of air within open spaces of concealed construction? So let's take a look at that. It's a draft stop. A material device restricts the movement of air within open spaces. That's its definition. Let's go to 28. A habitable space includes which of the following? So if you look at it, go to the Chapter 2 and just, if you take a look at habitable space, so kitchens are a habitable space. But items listed here that are not, it actually says they're not considered habitable spaces. Bathrooms, halls, storage, those are not habitable spaces. This is one of those definitions that's really important for you to know because it comes up like an interior environment, stuff like that, those chapters. You need to know what a habitable space is. What is the percent cross-sectional area required for a masonry unit to be considered as hollow? So is it hollow or is it filled? So let's look at Chapter 2 under masonry units. Hollow masonry unit with a net cross-sectional area of 75%. That's the magic number. So if you come back here, select 75%. Which of the following species of wood is considered both decay and termite resistant? Let's go ahead and take a look at decay resistant. Let's see here. Naturally durable wood. And if you look here, take a look. You have decay resistant section, termite resistant. They're asking which are on both lists. And this is actually right from the test. And it happens to be cedar and cedar. That's the one you're going to pick. The rest of them don't. The rest of those answers would not apply. All right, so slope glazing is installed at a slope from vertical of what? Now what I'm asking here, what's being asked here is what is the definition of vertical? What delineates vertical and like a skylight? And there's an angle associated with it. And I want to be clear, this is different than what you're going to find in the IBC. But if you look at Chapter 2, under skylights and slope glazing, they give you the number of 15 degrees right there. So just select 15 degrees. Plywood is an example of, it's a wood structural panel, but let me show you that definition really quick. If you look here, the reason this is important, I'll actually show you some questions I have on this exam why it's important, but examples of wood structural panels are plywood. That's the only place you're going to find that definition, so it's really handy to know that. What is the minimum thickness of wood structural panels installed to protect exterior glazing in buildings located in windward debris regions? So if you're if you're like in a hurricane zone and you're set up with your windows so that you can have pre-drilled and pre-cut plywood put into place, well, what's the minimum thickness of that plywood? Let's look at R 301.2.1.2 and the exceptions. So jump over to R 301.2.1 and let's see, 1.2 exception. So it's right there, 7/16 inches what it is. The ones I've highlighted in blue, it's more likely to be on the residential plans examiner, but the rest of the ones in yellow are all going to be on the residential building inspector. So 7/16 is the answer. So just select 7/16. Let's jump over. Who is responsible for determining the seismic design category for a building? If you look here, what it says is, let's just flip this around here. Climatic and geographic design criteria. So look at table 301.2, seismic design category. If you follow it down, the jurisdiction shall fill in this part of the table with the seismic design category. So if you're building something, you have to know your seismic design category on. Make sure you go to the jurisdiction to get that information. That's where you need to go. All right, so let's say you have some 7/16 wood structural panels for wind impact zones protecting openings. You're using number 8 screw-based anchors with 2-inch embedment length for panels, and the panels have a width of 7 feet. What is the fastener spacing? So let's look at table 301.2.1.2. 301.2.1.2. And if you look here, it gives you all the specs I gave you, and it's actually 8 inches. So fastener spacing is 8 inches. So go ahead and select 8. 6, what is the default assumed wind exposure category? So when you're not given any information on that, you have to pick a default. Let's go to R301.2.1.4.1. Exposure B shall be assumed unless the site meets the definition of another type of exposure. So that gives you the answer. Exposure B is what it says. Buildings with exterior above-grade concrete walls shall comply with PCA 100 or shall be designed in accordance with. Now, this question is asking basically standards, saying, well, hey, you can use PCA 100 for your building, for your concrete walls, if you have concrete walls in the structure, or it's obvious. ACI 318 is what it is. Well, let's look at 301.2.5. 301.2.2.5. You jump over here ways, get through all these maps. So building with exterior above-grade concrete walls shall comply with PCA 100 or shall be designed in accordance with ACI 318. So that's your answer, ACI 318. And American Concrete Institute, ACI. ACI 318 is very commonly used, which I said it's obvious. Maybe that was wrong to say. But if you're involved in construction, ACI 318 is what you'd always use for concrete. All right, 38. Buildings are required to be engineered in regions with a ground snow load in excess of what? So what this says is, like my region, I have a 40 PSF ground snow load. But at what threshold do the codes, you can't use prescriptive codes? And a lot of municipalities require everything to be engineer stamped, but some don't. But if you're above a certain threshold, you have to have an engineered plan, that's stamped documents. Let's take a look at that reference, R301.2.3. R301.2.3, snow loads. Regions with a ground snow load of 70 PSF or less shall be in accordance with, under 70 is chapters 5, 6, and 8, or prescriptive. Buildings in regions with ground snow loads greater than 70 PSF shall be designed in accordance with engineering practice. So if you're in like Aspen, Colorado, Park City, you're going to need to have a stamp, or Timberline Lodge type thing in Oregon. Dimensions of lumber specified within the code are deemed to be, so if it says 2x4, what does that mean? 2x6, what does it mean? Let's look at 301.8. So 301.8, if you jump through the code here, nominal sizes. For the purpose of this code, dimensions of lumber specified shall be deemed to be nominal. Seems kind of intuitive if you've ever worked the trades, but it was a question right from the test. I'm not making this up. What is the accepted uniformly distributed live load for an attic used for limited storage? This is an important table, table R301.5. Know this table. Let's take a look really quick. If you look through this table, it says uninhabitable attics with limited storage. It's 20 PSF. Some other options, balconies would be, where are we at? 40 PSF. Guards, 200 linear. It has to be able to withstand a concentrated load for your guardrail of 200 feet. Same thing with handrail. Passenger vehicle garage is 50 PSF. Other areas is 40 PSF other than sleeping areas. And sleeping areas is 30 PSF. I read all that because if you take a look, so this answer is 20 PSF. What is the accepted uniformly distributed live load for a bedroom? It's 30 PSF. But what I want to emphasize is you really should know that chapter, because that chapter dictates what tables and subsequent chapters for like your rafters, your girders, your joists that you're going to select. So you really need to know that up front when you're doing a plans review. Common wall separating townhouse units shall be rated for fire exposure. So let's look at 302.2.2. 302.2.2. Common walls. Common walls separating townhouse units shall be assigned a fire resistance rating in accordance with item shall be rated for fire exposure from both sides. That's the key element right there, both sides. While we're on this section, I want to point this out. You can't have anything in this fire rated construction. So it says you can't have plumbing or mechanical equipment or ducts or vents or anything within these common walls that separated townhouse occupancies, or dwellings, or units, I guess, townhouse units. So take a look at that. So the first answer is exposure for both sides. If you come over here, the answer is from both sides. And then 43, foundation vents installed in compliance with the code are less than 1 foot from an adjacent structure are required to be protected with what fire rating? Let's pause there. Look at 44 really quick. What gauge of steel and mechanical ducting is required at a minimum for mechanical equipment in a common wall that separates townhouses? And equipment is prohibited. We read that section, so that's what I wanted to bring that up. Let's look at 43 again. So foundation vents. This gets a little tricky, and I'll show you here in a sec. On the next page, there's a table, but basically, foundation vents into a crawl space, you don't have to have the opening protected, unlike you do for exterior walls. But let me read that to you. 302.1 exception 5. 302.1 exception 5. Foundation vents installed in compliance with the code are permitted. And if you jump over here, the reason this is important is this table 302.1 parenthesis 1. And I'll explain this in a moment. Let's continue with this. Okay, what is the minimum fire rating for a common wall separating sprinklered townhouse units? So let's go ahead and take a look at 302.2.2.2.1. 302.2.2.1. So normally you'd be 2 hours, but where an automatic sprinkler system is in accordance with section is provided, the common wall shall be not less than 1 hour. So the reason I'm saying that is if a suppression system is installed, you need 2 hour rated construction. If it's not installed, it's 1 hour construction. The reality is all residential occupancies need to have suppression, but most municipalities amend that so it doesn't require it. That's why these sections are here. Unsuppressed is 1 hour. Excuse me, suppressed is 1 hour. Unsuppressed is 2 hour. So what is the minimal fire rating for a common wall separating sprinklered townhouse units? It's 1 hour. All right, townhouse roof surfaces on the same elevation that are adjacent to a parapet. So if you have a townhouse and it's separated, it's not separated, you have some fire, I don't use the term firewall. You don't always need a firewall, but you need a protective barrier and need a parapet wall so the fire can't jump up and over the wall. How high is that little wall on the roof of townhouses that separates two townhouses? Let me just read that to you, 302.2.4. So 302.2.4, parapets for townhouses, and if you look, it's 30 inches. You can read this here. Go ahead and select that. Yeah, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Instead of showing you the code every time, I'll just read it, go through it, so that way you can kind of understand it. It just takes a long time to do. So townhouse roof surfaces, we answered that, 30 inches. Dwelling units in 2-story family dwellings that are sprinklered shall be separated from each other by what minimum fire rated? Now this is a little bit different than the townhouse separating 2 townhouses. This is separating a couple dwelling units, 2-story family dwellings. So the answer is a little bit different. Let me read that to you, 302.3. So if you go to 302.3 now and down to exception 1, it says a fire resistance rating of ½ hour shall be permitted. That's how you'd answer that. And I do have a lot of stuff highlighted on these pages that I'm not reflecting in my tests. Go to my other residential building inspector video. I actually went through and just show you all the highlights. It's going to take a long time to go through each highlight with you and read the whole thing, so I'm not going to do that here on out. What is the space created by the penetration of a water-filled sprinkler piping through penetrations of fire resistance rated wall referred to as? And what's the definition? And if you look, that should have put in a parenthesis here. I didn't proofread that, but it's R302.4.1.2, and it's actually annular space. That's how you define that. So I'll pick annular there. Openings from a private garage directly into a room used for sleeping purposes. So if you have a garage next to a residence, actually connected to a residence, and it opens a door or a window into a bedroom, when's that allowed? When allowed by the AHJ, when there is at least a 1 hour fire rating, when the garage has a person door accessing the outside. Technically, you're never allowed to do that. What it says is openings from a private, this is 302.5.1, openings from a private garage directly into a room used for sleeping purposes shall not be permitted, period. Can't do it. So never. All right, take a look at the next one, question 50. The door thickness for openings between the garage and a residence when equipped with a solid wood door shall be no less than how thick? Well, the answer is 1 3/8. Once again, 302.5.1. Other openings between the garage and residence other than a dwelling room, sleeping room. And residence shall be equipped with solid wood doors not less than 1 3/8 in thickness. So that's the answer. All right, 51. What is the maximum flame spread index for the interior finish in a residence? So Class C interior finish. Let's go and take a look at 302.9.1. 302.9.1 is wall and ceiling finishes shall have a flame spread index of not greater than 200. And what that does, just for your awareness, it limits your flashover potential to about 3 minutes, typically, which you evaluate, which gives people plenty of time to egress. That's the principle behind it. All right, 52, the maximum smoke developed index for insulating materials installed within floor ceiling assemblies shall not exceed what value? And just keep in mind the 450 here, it's going to come up over and over and over again. It's always 450. Let's look at 302.10.1. They shall exhibit a flame spread index not to exceed, this is a little bit different, 25, 29 is insulating material. Smoke develop index not to exceed 450. So insulating material within floor ceiling assemblies, you have to have a flame spread index not to exceed 25. It's a little bit different than like plywood on a wall. You can have plywood on a wall. It's not a problem. It's Class C interior finish. We're specifically talking about insulation, foam insulation type stuff. All right, let's see. Let's go to the next one. What is the minimum required gypsum thickness to separate a garage from a non-habitable attic? And table R302.6 is frequently confused. The answer is actually 1/2 inch. It does not have to be type X. A lot of people misunderstand that, but just look at R302.6 if you don't believe me. What is the minimum required gypsum thickness to separate a garage from a habitable room above the garage? It's actually same table, 302.6. This is what it says. Separation from habitable room above the garage to a garage. It's not less than 5/8 inch type X gypsum board or equivalent. So that's what you need to remember there. All right, fire blocking. Fire blocking shall be provided in concealed spaces of stud walls and partitions horizontally at intervals not to exceed what? Let's take a look at R302.11.1.1.2. R302.11. So if you come down here, .1.1.2. Horizontally at intervals not to exceed 10 feet. That's what the code says under that reference. Fire blocking shall be provided in wood frame construction in all the following locations except. Well, within concealed spaces between, it actually gives you a list. Let me read the list. Come to 302.11.1 and just look at them all. So it says where you need it is in concealed spaces between stair stringers, the top and bottom of the run. You know, got that represented here. At openings around vents, yes. Around chimneys, yes. Between trim and wallboard, no. You don't need it there. Not a big deal. All right, fire blocking materials can be any of the following except, now this will catch you. So watch this from 302.11.1. This is what the list says. Except as provided in section 302.11 item 4, fire blocking shall consist of the following. You can use 2-inch nominal lumber, 2 thicknesses of 1-inch nominal lumber with broken lap joints. Excuse me. 1 thickness of 23 and 30 seconds wood structurals with joint backed by, 23 and 30 seconds inch wood structural panels. 1 thickness of 3/4 inch particle board with joints backed. At 1/2 inch of gypsum board. Expect, you're going to have to tape those joints. But the answer here is, it's right here. Which one is not going to be allowed? Well, it's right there. You have to have backed joints. It says it right under 302.11.1.4. So you have to have them backed. And this answer is not backed. That's what ICC, that's the kind of question they're going to ask you. All right, 58. Draft stops shall be installed so that the area of concealed space does not exceed what area in combustible construction with usable space above the concealed location. Let's look at 302.1.2, or 302.12. Draft stopping. Draft stops shall be installed so that the area of the concealed space does not exceed 1,000 square feet. All right, where the assembly is enclosed by a floor membrane. Above a ceiling membrane, membrane above and a ceiling membrane below, a draft stop shall be provided in the floor ceiling assemblies when? Okay, 302.12.2. Let's go to 302.12.2. It's 302.12 subsection 2. I should add that in parentheses or something. Floor framing is considered of truss type open web or perforated members. So what this says is if you have like a floor membrane, a floor and a ceiling membrane, and instead of like TJIs or something, or 2x12s, you have open web trusses. Well, you can have like, fire blow right through that and take out your house really fast. So what you have to do is have some kind of draft stopping. Put up like gypsum or the sheetrock or the plywood, whatever, structural panels in there, so you're limiting yourself to 1,000 square feet. That's what that means. So, okay, let's go to 60. Unrated floor assemblies using structural panel sheets as subfloor shall require which of the following in the underside of the floor framing? So what that's saying is 302.13. Let me read that to you. Floor assemblies that are not required elsewhere in this code to be fire resistance rated shall be provided with a 1/2-inch gypsum wall board, or there's some other options, on the underside of floor framing members. So if you have like a floor, you apply one on top of your floor joist. You have to have some gypsum underneath it, is what it's saying. You go and inspect houses a lot, finished housing. They just have exposed wood flooring. That's not allowed. All right, light, ventilation, and heating. Section 303. Let's go to the next one. Excluding exemptions. The glazing area shall be a minimum of what percentage of the floor area of habitable rooms? So let's look at our 303.1. Habitable rooms shall have an aggregate glazing area of not less than 8% of the floor area of that room. Excluding exemptions, and there are some exemptions attached to this. Just look at 303.1. Excluding exemptions, the openable area to the outdoors shall be not less than what percentage of the floor area of habitable rooms? So continuing in the same section, the openable area to the outdoors shall be not less than 4%, the floor area being served. Excluding exemptions, so this is 63, a room shall be considered to be a portion of an adjoining room where not less than half of the area of the common wall is open and unobstructed and provides an opening of not less than what percentage of the floor area of the interior room. In other words, can you have a room that doesn't meet the requirements for, like window spacing? And the answer is you can. Let me read that to you, 303.2. Okay, so if you, let's just look at this, our 303.2. Let me look at this again. For the purpose of determining light and ventilation requirements, rooms shall be considered to be a portion of an adjoining room where not less than 1/2 of the area of the common wall is open and unobstructed, and provides an opening of not less than 1/10 of the floor area. That's what the code reference says. All right, 64. What is the aggregate glazing area in windows, half of which are openable, in bathrooms that are not supplied by a local exhaust system? So technically, bathrooms do not have to have mechanical ventilation. Every bathroom you go to has like a 50 CFM fan in it. You don't technically need that if you have a window. So let's look at 303.3. That's the reference, R303.3. I'll read that to you. Bathrooms. Water closet compartments and other similar rooms shall be provided with aggregate glazing area in the window of not less than 3 square feet, 1/2 of which shall be openable. So that's the allowance to get you out of mechanical ventilation. All right. Mechanical outdoor air intake openings can be located no closer than how far below a contaminant source. So want to put something out there. You have a couple options. This is where the 5-foot rule or 10-foot rule comes into play. But let's look at R303.5.1, exception 1. So 303.5. That reads as follows. Mechanical and gravity outdoor air intake openings shall be located not less than 10 feet from any hazardous or noxious contaminants such as vents, chimneys, plumbing vents, streets, alleys, parking lots, and loading docks. Go down to exception 1. The 10-foot separation is not required where the intake opening is located 3 feet or greater below the contaminant source. So if you have like some exhaust or something like that on the side of your building, you name it. It could be sewer, it could be a lot of stuff, but something that you don't want bringing back into your building, you have to be, for your air intake, it has to be at least 3 feet below it or 10 feet away from it laterally. All right. What did I do here? Okay, 66. Exhaust air from mechanical systems shall not be directed on which of the following. Let's look at 303.5.2. 303.5.2, exhaust openings. Exhaust air shall not be directed on the sidewalks or walkways. Pretty obvious, everything else. And there's some offsets. I said more than 15 feet above a sidewalk. I can't remember the actual number, if it's 20 feet, but there's some allowance in the mechanical code. You can put up high. But the point is, as long as it's not directly onto a sidewalk within, basically within anywhere that an occupant's going to smell it, not a problem. All right, intake openings that terminate outside shall have openings between how much? So what that's saying is, if you have an intake opening for air, what size does your mesh have to be? And R303.6. So let's take a look at that. Outdoor opening protection. Air exhaust and intake openings that terminate outdoors shall be protected with corrosion-resistant screens, etc., etc. Opening size of not less than 1/4 of an inch and a maximum opening size of 1/2 inch. So the answer is 1/4 to 1/2 right there. There shall be a wall switch at each floor level to control the light source where the stairway has more than how many risers? R303.7. Let's look at that. 303.7. Interior stairway illumination. Interior stairways shall be provided with artificial light source to illuminate the landings and treads. There shall be a wall switch at each floor level to control the light source when the stairway has 6 or more risers. So basically you need a 3-way at the bottom and top if you have 6 or more risers. In this case it's actually 5. It says 6 or more, but it's more than 5 the way this is worded. Just keep that in mind. That'll throw you too. So read your question very clearly. All right, 69. Exterior stairways shall be provided with an artificial light source located at the landing of the stairways at what location? Oh, exterior. This will get you. Look at 69. Exterior stairways. It's not talking about interior. Look at R303.8, and I'll read that. Exterior stairways shall be provided with an artificial light source located at the top landing of the stairway. That's it. Top. Not expected to have one at the bottom. Unless you have like a basement stairway, an exterior basement, the stairway that like goes down to a basement door, then you need one at the bottom. That's the caveat with that. Just keep that in mind. All right, every dwelling unit shall be provided with heating facilities capable of maintaining a room temperature of not less than what value at a point 3 feet above the floor. Just always remember 68 degrees, and it's also 2 feet away from the wall. Keep that in mind. Let me read 303.10 to you. Required heating. Every dwelling unit shall be provided with heating facilities capable of maintaining a room temperature of not less than 68 degrees Fahrenheit at a point 3 feet above the floor and 2 feet from exterior walls and habitable rooms. Make sure you understand that. We're not talking technically. Bathrooms are not a habitable rooms, but it expands that, I believe. No, just habitable rooms. Just keep that in mind, habitable rooms. So there's like hallways, bathrooms, storage closets, don't require that. Except for kitchens, habitable rooms shall have a minimum area of how big? What's the minimum size? You can always be smaller in a kitchen, but all other habitable rooms have to be what size? And keep in mind, a bathroom is not a habitable room. This is going to catch you. 304.1. Habitable rooms shall have a floor area of not less than 70 square feet. So that's what it comes down to. 70 square feet. And most bathrooms, I don't think, come anywhere close to that, just for your awareness. All right, exception for kitchens. What is the minimum width of a habitable room? Minimum width. So you can always go smaller than 7 feet. Let's look at 304.2. 304.2. So habitable rooms shall be not less than 7 feet, except for kitchens. You can go narrower than that in a kitchen. All other habitable rooms have to be at least 7 feet. Portions of a room under what height? This is question 73. Portions of a room under what height shall not be used in the minimum required habitable area for that room? Now I want to be clear. Technically your ceiling height on a mezzanine and standard room in residential construction is 7 feet. But you are allowed to have like sloping rooms, like a bonus room in an attic or something like that. Let's say you had a stem wall that's in a bonus room that's maybe 2 feet, okay? In calculating your area, how high does the wall have to, or the ceiling have to be? That's what this question is. And you're allowed to have, I think it's half of the area under 7 feet for in slope rooms. It's something like that. But you can't go under 5 feet. So let's look at 304.3 because this will catch you. 304.3. Height. Portions of a room with a sloping ceiling measuring less than 5 feet from the finished floor to the finished ceiling shall not be considered as contributing to the minimum required habitable area. So you could have a 120 square foot bedroom or room. Every building has to have at least 120 square foot room or minimum 70 square feet for habitable room. And let's say the walls are below 5 feet. You're not code compliant in that case. So you just got to know that 5 foot rule. All right, let's see. Excluding exemptions in rooms with sloped ceilings, the minimum ceiling height of habitable spaces shall not be less than, let's look, R305.1, exemption 1, 305.1. Okay, so this is what it says. In rooms, okay, I'm in 305.1, says that spaces shall have ceiling height of not less than 7 feet, but you can go down to exemption 1 and it says, you know, for rooms with sloped ceilings, the required floor area of the room shall not have ceiling height of not less than 5 feet, not less than 50% of the required floor area shall have a ceiling height of not less than 7 feet. So the answer is always 7 feet. Now keep in mind, this is residential construction. Your limit is 7 feet 6 inches in commercial construction. Don't let that kind of confuse you. Mezzanines are always 7 feet though, in residential or commercial. That's the one thing that stays the same. Right, 75, every dwelling unit shall be required to have all of the following except. Let's go ahead and read through that. 306.1. Toilet facilities, every dwelling shall be provided with a water closet, lavatory, and a bathtub or shower. 306.2, you have to have a sink. So what does that tell me? I need a sink, lavatory, water closet, but I don't have to have a bathtub. I can have a shower or a bathtub. Shower walls shall be finished with a non-absorbent surface extending from the floor to at least. So if you have a shower or even a bathtub that's enclosed, let's say, and you have a shower head at the top, you have to have non-absorbent walls of how high? Let's take a look at R307.2. It says, shall be finished with non-absorbent surface. Such wall surfaces shall extend to a height of not less than 6 feet above the floor. Okay, 77. What is the minimum clear space required in front of a toilet? So if you're mounting a toilet, how far in front of it do you have to have? And if you look, there's actually a, let me just pick this up for you. Take a look at that graph, whatever you want to call it, the figure. This is figure 307.1. Look at that figure for these answers. It's actually not in the code. It's in the graph or the figure. It's actually 21 inches in front. What is the minimum clear space required to the side of the center of the toilet? It's 15 inches based on that figure. And then what are the minimum dimensions of a shower? It's 30 by 30, 900 square inches. That's likewise in the figure. Those are minimums. You can always be bigger. Okay, 80. Question 80. Glazed areas shall be tempered glassed for. So if you're in high hazard areas, and maybe I didn't word this right, but if you're in a high hazard area, you have to have protected glass. But there's some kinds of glasses that don't have to be protected in a high hazard area. So picture this, a bathroom, slippery floor. You have glass in there. Anywhere there's water, it's considered a high hazard area if you're going to slip, like next to a pool or something like that. What kind of glass has to be tempered glass, for instance? So if you look at it, human impact loads. So I'm in 308.3. Individual glazed areas, including glass mirrors and hazardous locations, such as those indicated as defined in section 308.4, shall pass the test requirements of 308.3.1. That means impact resistant. But there's some exceptions. One are louvered windows, one are mirrors. The mirrors, though, have to be fastened to a continuous backing support. This is the question that'll get you. And then glass unit masonry, the glass blocks. So technically glazing in doors is the only one that's there. But I want to emphasize the way ICC will word this, they'll say mirrors, but they won't specify it's continuously supported by the back. And that'll get you. So question 80 here, the answer is glazing in doors. If it had just said mirrors not mounted on a surface with continuous backing support, then it would be mirrors. All right, 31. Glazing in a fixed panel adjacent to a door shall be considered in a hazardous location where the bottom edge of the glazing is less than 60 inches above the walking surface. So 60 inches, you'll see that a lot. Above the walking surfaces and within how far of either end of the door. So if you have a door, basically, you know, if you've ever done construction, you have a door, let's say a door that opens up, how far on either side of the door do you have to have tempered glass? And the answer is 24 inches. Let me read the code for you so you can see it. 308.4.2. Where the glazing is within 24 inches of either side of the door in the plane of the door in a closed position. So what I mean by that is a lot of people don't realize if I'm above 5 feet from the finished floor, technically speaking, I don't have to have tempered glass within 2 feet of the door. But if you're within 60 inches of the finished floor, you do have to have tempered glass as long as you're within 24 inches of the side of your door frame, or the door itself within the frame. Okay, glazing that is 40 inches from the edge of a pool shall be tempered or otherwise protected if it is within how far vertically of the walking surface. Once again, 60 inches comes up. Let's see, that is 308.4.5. Let me just read that to you. I want to go through all of this. Swimming pools where the bottom exposed edge of the glazing is less than 60 inches vertically above any standing or walking surface shall be considered a hazardous location. Exception, glazing that is more than 60 inches horizontally from the water's edge. So once again, in this question, you're 40 inches away from the pool edge. You're under 60 inches down. It's hazardous. 83. Glazing within 36 inches of the floor at the bottom of stairways, within what radius distance of the corner of the bottom of the stair edge shall be protected as hazardous? Look at this figure, 308.4.7. Just pop that open. It says it's 60 inches, so that's where you get that number from. Okay, all of the following are allowed as glazing materials for skylights except... So skylights, you have to either have them screened underneath or you have to meet certain requirements. So let's look at 308.6.2. That says as follows. Glazing materials shall be limited to fully tempered glass, heat strengthened glass, wired glass. There's some other options, but the reality is standard plate glass is the only one not on that list. So you can't use that one. Screens, if they're required under skylights, shall have a minimum mesh size of not greater than what size mesh? 308.6.3 and 308.6.7. Let's look at 6.7 really quick. And it says 1 by 1. And if you look at 6.3, this is where it says shall not be installed below the full area of glass except for fully tempered glass, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there it is, broken glass retention screen. But look at 308.6.7, that's what's going to give you the actual dimension 1 by 1. Okay. Curbs required on a skylight. So if you have a curb, if you have a slope less than 25%, so 3 and 12, if you're under a 312 slope, you have to have curbs on your skylight that have a certain height on the curbs. What is that height? So let's look at 308.6.8. 308.6.8 says, let's see, skylights installed on a roof with a pitch of less than 3 units vertical and 12 units horizontal shall be mounted on a curb extending not less than 4 inches above the plane of the roof. So 4 inches, that's where it comes from. Okay, definition of carports. Carports shall be open on not less than how many sides? This is question 87. Reference 309.2. And if you look, the number, it gives it a definition. It's not in Chapter 2. This is strictly Chapter 3. Carports shall be open on less than 2 sides. And the reason this is important, I previously talked about the prohibition on having a garage next to a sleeping unit, right? Well, that same prohibition doesn't exist for carports. So, and the delineation is open on two sides. So that's why it's important to know that. All right, emergency escape and rescue openings shall have a net clear opening of not less than what, except for grade floor emergency escape and rescue openings. R310.2.1. So if I come over here, emergency escape and rescue openings have to have 5.7 square feet. Now there's exceptions to that if you're on, this is what's important. The minimum net clear opening for grade floor emergency escape and rescue openings shall be 5 square feet. If you are on grade floor, otherwise it's 5.7. So like a basement location, you need your emergency escape access, 5.7 square feet for basement type thing. But main floor is 5. Right, the minimum net clear opening height of an emergency escape and rescue opening, 310.2.2. It is, I'll just read this to you. The minimum net clear opening height is 24 inches. And while I'm here, let me just read all these to you. Let's see. Okay, the next one. Minimum net clear opening width dimension of an emergency escape and rescue open. 310.2.2. Where are you at here? Is that right? Bear with me. There it is, 20 inches. The minimum net clear opening width dimension shall be 20 inches. Okay, let's read question 91. Emergency escape and rescue openings shall have the bottom of the clear opening not greater than how high above the floor. This will get you 44 inches. Let's read that. Emergency escape and rescue openings shall have the bottom of the clear opening not greater than 44 inches. Why this will get you is other places require guards at 36 inches. Some places it's 42 inches. But for some reason, your emergency escape window is allowed to be at 44 inches. So I don't know why. Just what it is. Emergency escape and rescue openings installed under decks. So if you have like a basement bedroom that needs an emergency escape and rescue opening, and it goes under a deck, what size, the path, provide a path of not less than how high under the deck. So you need head clearance of how high to be able to get out using that escape opening. And let me just read this to you, 310.2.4. Emergency escape and rescue openings installed under decks, porches, and cantilevers shall be fully open and provide a path of not less than 36 inches. That's what the code says. Question 93. The horizontal area of an area well that serves an emergency escape and rescue opening below grade shall be not less than how many square feet? So you have your window well thing, your protective thing. How many square feet opening horizontally does it have to have? Let's look at 310.4.1. If I come over to 310.4.1, it says the horizontal area of the area shall not be less than 9 feet. That's what the code says right there. 94, you have to have a ladder if you are beneath a certain distance. I believe it's 44 inches. You have to have a ladder in that well, okay, to be able to get back up out of the well. Otherwise, you're trapped. So the ladder is going to encroach on that required 9 square feet. Well, how much is it allowed to? A ladder that serves an area well supporting an access to an emergency escape and rescue opening shall not encroach into the required horizontal area well by more than, it's 310.4.1. I'll read that to you. It's the exception. The ladder steps required by section 310.4.2 shall be permitted to encroach not more than 6 inches into the required dimension of the area well. That's what it is. What did I have there? Area wells providing access to a below-grade emergency escape and rescue opening shall have a ladder if the depth is greater than, let me just read this to you, R310.4.2. Area wells with a vertical depth greater than 44 inches shall be equipped with an approved permanently affixed ladder. That's what it says. 96. Means of egress paths from inside a dwelling to the exterior is required without passing through what? So you always have to have a means of access, means of egress access. So what you can't do, every door has to have one means of egress door. What you can't do is have a means of egress door on your garage and no other doors. So in this case, let's look at 310.4.2, or excuse me, 311.1. 311.1. So R311.1, let me actually read that. Let me flip the page here. 311.1, means of egress. The means of egress shall provide a continuous and unobstructed path of vertical and horizontal egress travel from all portions of the dwelling to the required egress door without requiring travel through a garage. It's a requirement. Question 97. Not less than one egress door shall be provided for each dwelling unit where the door is side hinged and no less than what clear width? So if you have an egress door, I want to be clear, means of egress door, minimum width is 32 inches. Let's read 311.2. Not less than one egress door shall be provided for each dwelling unit. The egress door shall be side hinged and shall provide a clear width of not less than 32 inches. It also says the clear height of the door opening shall be not less than 78 inches. So that's what it says, answers question 98. The clear height of required means of egress door for a dwelling unit shall not be under 78 inches. Now I want to be clear, that's different than the IBC. IBC is a couple inches more, but just keep in mind this is residential. All right. The slope at exterior landings for residential dwellings shall not exceed 1/4 unit vertical for each what? So let me just read 311.3. So the slope at exterior landings shall not exceed 1/4 unit vertical. So 1 in 48 is what it is. You'll see 1 in 48 everywhere, 2%. That's the cross slope for walkways, cross slope for landings, cross slope for stairs. So it's going to be across the board. So it's referred to cross slope, but the way the code says is slope. You just got to know that. All right, question 100. Excluding exemptions, the landing at an exterior door within a dwelling unit shall be no more than how much lower than the top of the threshold. So let me explain that. 311.3.1. Floor elevations at the required egress doors. Landings or finished floors at the required egress door shall be not more than 1.5 inches lower than the top of the threshold. And if you look at the exception, take a look at that. The landing of or floor on the exterior side shall be not more than 7 3/4 inches below the top of the threshold, provided that the door does not swing over the landing or threshold. So this is a lot different than commercial code, which is 1/2 inch. You're allowed 1.5 inches. The threshold can stick up 1.5 inches above the landings on either side of the door. But if the door does not swing over a landing for your exterior side, you can actually have a step underneath that landing, not to exceed 7 3/4 inches, which is the standard riser height for residences. So what that tells you is that answers the second question. The landing or floor on the exterior side of a residential exterior door where the door does not swing over the landing or floor is allowed to be lower than the top of the threshold by riser height, 7 3/4 inches. Okay, 102. A top landing at an exterior door that does not swing over the landing is not required if the stairway to that landing is not more than how many risers? So let's just take a look at R11.3.2. This is the exception. So floor elevation and other exterior doors. Doors other than the required egress doors shall be provided with landings or floors not more than 7 3/4 below the top of the threshold. A top landing is not required where a stairway of not more than 2 risers is located on the exterior side of the door, provided that door does not swing over the stairways. So keep in mind, what I didn't put in this question was that if you just have like a utility access, something like that, it's probably more applicable, but regardless, just use two risers as the principle here. Just know that section. All right, 2/3 of the way, guys. Thanks for listening. It's killing me, but let's just get this done. Question 103, what is the minimum width of a residential hallway? So let's look at R311.6. R311.6 says as follows, the width of a hallway shall be not less than 3 feet. Question number 104, what is the minimum clear width between handrails for interior residential stairways? That's R311.7.1. And I want to point out something, because technically stairways in residences have to be 36 inches wide at a minimum, but your handrails are allowed to protrude 4.5 inches into the clear width. So that means the width between the handrails is 2 times 4.5, which is 9, subtracted from 36. So that gets you 27. I'm going to read this to you. 311.7.1. Stairways shall not be less than 36 inches in clear width at all points above the permitted handrail height. The clear width of stairwells at and below the handrail height, including treads, landings, shall be not less than 31.5 inches. Where handrail is installed on one side and 27 in, okay, it's 31 inches if you have one handrail. If you have 2 handrails, and 27 inches where handrails are installed on both sides. That's where the 27 inches come from. All right, 105. What is the minimum headroom in stairways excluding exemptions? So R311.7.2. So let's take a look at R311.7.2. The headroom in stairways shall be not less than 6 feet 8 inches. And there's some exemptions here that you can take a look at, but just usually go with 80 inches. It makes it easy. All right, 106. What is the maximum riser height for residential stairways? So this is different than commercial. Commercial is always 7'11" as a minimum. 7-inch riser height, 11-inch tread. Residential is different. You're allowed to go to 7 3/4. Let's look at R311.7.5.1. It says the riser height shall be not more than 7 3/4 inches. So question 107. For any stairway flight, the risers shall be uniform in height within. So if you're doing a stairway, all your risers, you can't be more than 7 3/4. But you also can't jump from like 6 inches to 7 inches, that kind of thing. They have to be a uniform riser height. It avoids people tripping in the stairways. That answer happens to be 3/8 of an inch. If you look at R311.7.5.1, it says the greatest riser height within any flight of stairs shall not exceed the smallest by more than 3/8 of an inch. Okay, question 108. Open risers shall not permit a sphere passing through them of more than what size? So it's 4 inches is what it is. That mimics the head of a child. You're allowed to go to 4 3/4 in certain situations, but I'm not going to address that here. But just let's take a look at 311.7.5.1. At open risers, openings located more than 30 inches is measured vertically to the floor. You have to have guards where you can't fit a ball 4 inch diameter. What is the minimum tread depth for residential stairs? So we're not talking riser height now, we're talking depth. And remember I mentioned 7'11" is commercial. You're allowed to go down to 10 inches for residential. Let's look at R311.7.5.2. I'll read that. The tread depth shall not be less than 10 inches. Question 110. All treads within a stairway flight shall have a uniform length within what? I just answered that, didn't I? I had that twice. All right, so 311.7.5.2, 3/8 again. Winder treads shall have a tread depth at any point within the clear width of the stair that is no smaller than 6 inches. So if you have like winding stairways, you don't need the 10 inches because you're going to have a narrower part on one side than the other side to be able to do the curve. But the narrowest you can have is 6 inches. Let's take R311.7.5.2.1. Winder treads shall have a tread depth of not less than 6 inches at any point within the clear width of the stair. A nosing projection on stairways shall not be less than, so you have to, on all stairs, you have to nosing for the tread that comes out. It has to stick out a certain amount, a minimum and a maximum. So let me read that to you. R311.7.5.3. Winder 7. Where are we at? 753. Sorry, my head's starting to hurt. 311.753. There it is. A nosing projection of not less than 3/4 inches and not more than 1 1/4 inches. So 3 1/4 inches for a minimum and 1 1/4 inches for a maximum. So answer to question number 113. It says what is the maximum basically. It's 1 1/4 inches based on this. All right, 114. We're almost there, guys. A little less than 40. The walking surface of treads and landings of stairways shall not have a slope steeper than, remember it's 1/4 in 12 or 1 in 48 or 2%, right? It's 311.7.7. Stairway walking surfaces, the walking surfaces of treads and landings of stairways shall be sloped not steeper than 1 unit and 48 units horizontal. Okay, question 115. Handrails are required on at least one side of a stairway if there are more than how many risers? So Let's read that for you, 311.7.7. Let's see, where are we at here? I put down the wrong reference. Just bear with me, I got to look this up. Handrails are required. Stairway walking surfaces, where is it? Handrails, handrail height. Oh, there it is. I meant to put 311.7.8, not 311.7.7. But this is what 311.7.8 says. Handrails shall be provided on not less than one side of each flight of stairs with 4 more risers. So handrails, the way I worded this, there are more than how many risers? It's 3 more. All right, number 116, stairway handrail height shall be no lower than, just remember 34 and 38. 34 is the lower value. It can't be less. It can't be more than 38 inches. So 311.7.8.1, handrail height shall not be less than 4 inches and not more than 38 inches. So I'll answer both of those. 117 asks how high can it be? What's the highest? Okay, 118, handrail projection into stairways is limited to not more than, I think we've already talked about that, 4.5 inches. Let's look at 311.7.8.2. Handrails shall not project more than 4.5 inches on either side of the stair rail. Handrails with a circular cross-section, grabbing bar, shall have an outside diameter of not less than what? What's the minimum you can have? I'll read this to you. It says handrails shall have a circular cross-section of not less than 1.25 inches. And that was section R311.7.8.5.1. Okay, the clear width, this is question 120. The clear width between handrails on a spiral staircase shall not be less than, so this is quite a bit less. Let's go to 311.7.10.1, and it shall not be less than 26 inches. Okay, the maximum riser height for spiral staircases is, so riser height is different than standard residential construction. So let's take a look, R311.7.10, 311.7.10.1, it's 9.5 inches is what it says. The rise shall be not more than 9.5 inches, headroom shall not be less than 6 feet 6 inches. Okay, means of egress ramps shall have a slope no steeper than, now keep in mind, means of egress. You can have slopes below 1 in 12 or steeper than 1 in 12. But as far as a required means of egress path, if you're having a ramp, you have to be between 1 in 12 and 1 in 20. Now if you're above, if you're less steep than 1 in 20, 1 foot and 20 feet, if you're less steep than that, it's just a hallway. But to meet the definition of ramp, it's means of egress ramp. It's 1 in 12 to 1 in 20. So if I go to 311.8.1, it says maximum slope. Ramps serving the egress door required by section R311.2 shall have a slope of not more than 1 unit in 12. All right, a landing is required for ramps in each of the following situations except, let's look at R311.8.2. There shall be a floor or landing at the top and bottom. So if you look at the options, at top and bottom, where doors open under ramps, right there. Where ramp changes direction. So if you're coming down, you go 90 degrees, you need a landing there. The only thing it doesn't say is where ramp changes slope. So if you're down, let's say you're at a 1 in 16, they go to a 1 in 20. You don't have to have a landing there. I don't know, I'd probably want one, but whatever. But you don't have to. All right, 124, question 124. A handrail is required for ramps with a slope exceeding, now keep in mind, if you're steeper than 1 in 12, you have to have a handrail. But if you're like a regular ramp between 1 in 12 to 1 in 20, based on this, you don't. Let me read this to you. So it's R311.8.3. Handrails shall be provided on not less than one side of ramps exceeding a slope of 1 unit vertical and 12 units horizontal. That's what it says. Guardrails are required on any open-sided walking surfaces located above how many inches? So if you build a deck, you need guardrails. But you only need to do guardrails if it's above a certain height from the deck surface down to the ground. What is that distance? 312.1.1. Let's read that to you. 312.1.1 says, guards provided for those portions of open-sided walking surfaces, including blah, 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 that are located more than 30 inches. So hit the 30 inches. 126. What is the minimum height of guardrails for residential constructions? Now I want to be clear, guardrails are different than handrails. So guards are what are keeping you from falling. And it's different than commercial. Let me read 312.1.2. The required guards at open-sided walking surfaces, including stairs or porches, shall not be less than 36 inches. Now, OSHA and the IBC require 42 inches. So don't get confused by the 36. It's only applicable for residential construction. 127, required stairway guards shall not permit a sphere to pass through them that is greater than, once again, child's head, 4 inches. That's all you got to remember. 312.1.3, required guards shall not have openings from the walking surface to be required guard height that allow passage of a sphere 4 inches in diameter. And there's a couple exceptions. Some stairway issues can go to 4 3/8, but just read the exceptions if you have an issue. Smoke alarms are required in all of the following except. So technically, I'll just read it to you. It'd be easier if I do. Go to the section, smoke alarms shall be installed in each sleeping area, outside each sleeping area, on each additional story of the dwelling unit, including basements, which you don't need them is in a non-habitable attic. All right. Question 129, smoke alarms are required to receive their primary power from, keep in mind if you're building new construction, you have your smoke alarm has to be tied to all the other ones, and it has to get its primary power from the structure, but it has to have a battery backup. Don't get confused by that. It's building wiring we're talking about. So let's read 314.6. Smoke alarms receive primary power from the building wiring. That's what it says. 130, single station smoke alarms are not necessary if there is. It's kind of a tricky question. This is what 314.7 says. This is the reference for question 130. Fire alarm systems shall be permitted to be used in lieu of smoke alarm systems. There's a difference between standalone smoke alarms and fire alarm systems. NFP 72 would be required to be invoked. So that's how you do it. Come on in, guys. Hey, how are you doing? Yay! I'm going to turn off my stuff here really quick. And 131. What is the maximum flame spread index for foam plastic insulation that is 4 inches thick? So R316.31. Go to R316.31. It says, foam plastic insulation installed at 4 inches in thickness or less shall have a flame spread index of not more than 75. So 75 is the answer. 75, flame spread index of 75 for insulation that's 4 inches thick or less. 132. Foam plastic insulation shall be separated from the interior of a building by any of the following except. If you go to R316.4, it talks about a thermal barrier, gives a few options. And what that means is, if you look at Chapter 26 of the IBC, it's kind of the same thing. It requires a thermal barrier if you're using foam insulation. And typically, 1/2-inch gypsum is what's recommended, but they have some other stuff. So they say 1/2-inch gypsum wallboard, 23/32 inch wood structural panels, few odds and ends, things that are tested to a certain stuff. So in this case, it's 1/4-inch paneling because it's well below 23/32. So that's why that would be the wrong thing to do. 133, question reads as follows. Foam plastic insulation within attics is allowed to be protected from ignition by a thermal barrier of what? And if you look at R316.5.3.3.5, R16.5.3, there it is. So keep in mind, 1/2-inch gypsum is a typical thermal barrier. 3/8-inch gypsum is permitted in an attic. So if you definitely can't have a 1/4-inch gypsum, and nowhere, I don't even think it exists. But so that's the wrong answer. Foam plastic insulation. Let me read some of the other ones. You have 1/4-inch hardboard, 3/8-inch particle board. Let's see, foam plastic insulation with attics is allowed to be protected from ignition by a thermal barrier of, it's 3/8-inch gypsum is the answer. I had a few different options there. But if you read this section, section R316.5.3, it has a bunch of stuff, not just the 3/8-inch gypsum wallboard, but they have 1.5-inch thick mineral fiber board or 1/4-inch fiber cement panels, etc. Out of this list, the only one that would be viable is 3/8-inch gypsum. So let's go to 134. It reads as follows. Foam plastic interior trim that does not have a thermal barrier protecting it is allowed, provided that the trim does not exceed what percent of the aggregate wall ceiling area, R316.5.9.3. Let me read that to you. The interior trim shall not constitute more than 10% of the aggregate wall and ceiling area. And that's basically the standard for interior finish, 10%. You'll see that in the IBC as well for certain occupancies. So just keep in mind they have the interior finish requirements of the flame spread index of 200, for instance. That's applicable for interior finish, but they always give this trim allowance of about 10%. So let's take a look at 135. Wood joists within crawl spaces are required to be of naturally durable wood if they are within how far from the exposed ground. So what that means is if you have a crawl space that's short, let's say, you have to have protected timber if it's close to the ground. Not touching, but close to the ground. In this case, I think it's 18 inches. It's R317.1.1. Let me read that for you. 317.1.1 says, in crawl spaces of unexcavated areas located within the periphery of the building foundation, wood joists or the bottom of a wood structural floor where closer than 18 inches, you have to use pressure or naturally protected wood. And continuing on, if it's a wood girder, it's no closer than 12 inches. So in this case, wood joists, they're 18 inches. Wood girders, the next question, 136, wood girders within crawl spaces are required to be of naturally durable wood if they are within how far from the exposed ground? It's 12 inches. 137, let's read that. Naturally durable wood or preservative treated wood is required as siding if it is within what distance of the ground? So let's say you have siding up, you have ground. What's the separation between the bottom of the siding and the ground? Or, and the next question is concrete. There's two different numbers, but let's look at 317.1.5. What that says is as follows. Wood siding, sheeting, and wall framing on the exterior of a building having a clearance of less than 6 inches from the ground or less, or less than 2 inches from the siding to concrete, you have to have those as naturally durable wood, or pressure treated wood in this case. Let's see. Yeah, naturally durable wood or wood that's preservative treated, either one. So in this case, the answer was 2 inches from concrete, 6 inches from dirt. That's how that works out. Let's go ahead and jump into number 139 now. Wood columns must be of naturally durable wood or preservative treated wood if less than how far above the concrete. So when you're framing in a wall on a concrete slab, your bottom plate's always going to be pressure treated. And this is where it derives it basically. 317.1.9. If you have a column, it's going to have to be on a post or something that's pressure treated that protects it from moisture transportation through the concrete. So let's read 317.1.9. It says, wood columns in contact with basement floor slabs unless supported by concrete piers or metal pedestals projecting not less than 1 inch above the concrete floor needs to be naturally durable wood. So 1 inch is the magic number. Okay, 140, all wood in contact with the ground shall be, you have to have it pressure treated wood. You can't even use naturally durable wood. Let's look at 317.1.2. 317.1.2, is that right? Bear with me for a sec. Yeah, what am I thinking? 317.1.2 right here. So R317.1.2 reads as follows. All wood in contact with the ground or embedded in concrete, etc., etc. It has to be pressure preservative treated wood of the variety. There's multiple pressure treated wood. This is the pressure treated wood specifically designed for ground contact. All right, 141. The required quality mark on each piece of pressure preservative treated lumber shall contain all of the following. So if you ever looked at pressure treated wood, it has to be stamped. Well, what's required to be on that stamp? Let's look at R17.2.1. And what that says is, I'm reading not all of it, there's 7 items, let's just read 3. Which of the following, let's see, how does this worded? Shall contain all of the following information except. So identification of the treatment plant or treating plant, that's in the list from 317.2.1. End use for which the product was treated. So that's here as well. End use for which the product was treated. Was it moisture or direct contact with ground? Third item, identity of the approved inspection agency. You have to have that. And then the fourth one is kind of made up, quality inspection initials. So that's the one that doesn't apply. You don't need the quality inspector initials on that. 142, which of the following fastener materials are permitted for preservative treated wood? So always keep in mind you can never use aluminum. That's what it comes down to. But you're allowed, let's just read it. Fasteners for preservative treated wood includes nuts and washers, shall be of hot dip, zinc coated galvanized steel, stainless steel, silicon bronze, or copper staples, or copper. Staples shall be of stainless steel, etc., etc. Can't use aluminum. And that's just, it doesn't actually say it in here, but it gives you what you can do. Just figure out what's not in the list. All right, 143, all the following are acceptable methods for controlling subterranean termites except. So if you're in a area that has termite infestation, your jurisdiction's going to tell you that. Well, what are some methods to take care of that? Well, if you go at R318.1, the subsections have 6 ways you can treat this. One is chemical termiticide treatment. So if I look here, it says, chemical termicide treatment, termite baiting systems, pressure preservative treated wood. All 3 of those are in this list of 6. The one that's not is plastic sheeting. So that's the one you select for 143. All right, 144, in areas of very heavy termite infestation, the clearance between foam plastics installed above grade and the exposed earth shall be no less than how far? So if you look here, let me read it to you, R318.4. Says as follows: in areas where there is the probability of termite infestation is very heavy, the clearance between the foam plastics installed above grade and exposed earth shall not be less than 6 inches. Okay, 145, address numbers. So the IFC requires every house to have address numbers and notifications. So in the IRC, they're going to include that. Well, how big are the letters? Address numbers required on dwellings shall have a character height of no less than what? 319.1. Spelled out, each character shall not be less than 4 inches. By the way, also know the stroke width. This same section, R319.1, specifies a width not less than 0.5. That is a question that you could potentially see. I don't have it represented here. Just have the 4 inches as a height. The letters have to be 4 inches high. They also have to be ½ inch wide. 146. Areas of shallow flooding shall have the lowest floor above the grade where the flood level height is not specified by at least, well, it's 1 foot. But let me explain this question. So let's read R322.2.1.2. R322.2.1.2. Where are you at? 212, there it is. What this section's title is, Flood Hazard Areas Including Zone A's. Well, what if you're in a flood hazard zone, but you don't know the height of the floodwater type thing? This is what this section says, subsection 2, elevation requirements. In areas of shallow flooding, buildings and structures shall have the lowest floor, including the basement, elevated to a height above the highest adjacent grade of not less than the depth number specified in feet on the firm plus 1 foot, or not less than 3 feet. So if you know what it is, okay, if you have a specified, this firm determination, if you have the elevation of your flood water, add a foot to it. If you don't have it, go 3 feet above grade. That's what they specify. 147. Areas under the floodplain level are permitted to be used solely for the following items. Except. R322.2.2, R322.3.6. It's just a repeat of itself. Okay, solely for parking vehicles, building access, or storage. So playrooms is the one that is not included. So you can't really have a kid's, bedroom or something like that, playroom. That's what, anyway, you get the gist, the principle's there. It's very limited in terms of what you're allowed to do below grade in a flood zone. All right, walls. 148. The walls of enclosed areas under the floodplain level shall have at least how many openings on different sides of each enclosed area. So let me read that. 322.2.2.1. 322.2.2.1. There it is. Installation of openings. The walls of enclosed areas shall have openings installed such that there shall be not less than 2 openings on different sides of each enclosed area. So the answer is 2 enclosed areas, or 2 openings. 2 openings per side. All right, we're getting done. 3 more questions, guys. Buildings with coastal high hazard areas shall be elevated. Oh, crud. Did I do that? Sorry, guys. I realized I had expanded that out. My granddaughter came to visit. She wanted to see herself. So you didn't probably read the last 16 of them, but you still heard me talking. My head hurts. Your head hurts. Let's just get through this last couple here. Buildings within coastal high hazard areas shall be elevated so that the bottom of the lowest horizontal structural member is above the base flood elevation plus wet distance. 322.3.2. Let's jump over to 322.3.2. What does it say? Buildings and structures erected, elevated, has to be plus 1 foot above the base flood elevation. We already covered it, same stuff. It's just a different location. Buildings erected in coastal high hazard areas shall be, this is important to know. Let's look at R322.3.3. R22.3.3. Buildings and structures erected in coastal high hazard areas shall be supported on pilings or columns. So what that means is you can't have a foundation. If you're in a high hazard area, a coastal high hazard area, you cannot have a foundation. There's ways to do it, but the point is it's going to be supported by pilings or columns. You don't want a situation where it's supported by something that can get washed away. All right, or have excessive force against it that would knock it over. I already went through 151 and 152. 151 says when are walls permitted below the flood level plain in a coastal high hazard area. And, if you look, I don't think I read it. I'll read it to you. 322.3.5. I'll just read it to you for the sake of doing it. Walls and partitions are pinned below the elevation required in section such and such, provided that such walls and partitions are not part of the structural support. That's the key element. You cannot have a foundation supporting a structure in a coastal flooding area. Okay, let's see. The clear height above and below a mezzanine floor should not be less than 7 feet. I think I already talked on that. I think that was the last of them. Here's a couple other ones. So walls below required elevation are constructed with insect screening or open lattice. That was another potential test question I didn't cover. All right, guys. Thanks. Long video. Let's submit it and see what I got here. Oh, I missed one. Let's see which one I missed. Probably didn't select it. So if you just scan up really quick. Didn't even see it. Maybe the program's wrong or something. If you see red in there, great. But yeah, I don't see it. Oh. Yeah, anyway, the point is, I think we got them all acceptably well. You know how to do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Know where the references are. You don't need to know or memorize these questions and answers. You need to know how the layout of the code works. This is the tool that's provided for you to figure that out. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this. Hope you have a good day. Enjoy yourself.